Assalamu alaikum and Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's an honor for me to present my recent paper on economic secularization in comparison to Islamic beliefs, values, and norms. This is a conceptual paper, and I will be talking about the compatibility of the idea of economic secularization with beliefs, values, and norms which would prevail in an ideal Muslim society. Um, in this paper, I have attempted to make my argument through a comparative analysis. First, I have shown how the materialist, the secular, individualistic, and capitalist set of values, beliefs, and norms and worldview, which are prevalent in the developed part of the world, in particular, are at odds with the idea of economic secularization. And after this, I have shown how the economic secularization can easily sync with Islamic beliefs, values, and norms and the worldview. Before proceeding to my main thesis of the paper, I would quickly like to give a brief overview of what economic secularization is about. The idea of economic secularization is inspired by the nature's ability to produce and reuse everything in an equilibrium in such a way that nothing what the nature produce goes to waste, and rather it is consumed by something else. This has not been the case with the linear system of production and consumption established by the industrial capitalist world, which rather produces stuff and access while also emitting lots of toxic substances which the nature cannot absorb. So the idea behind economic circularization is to mimic the balance in nature and avoid producing anything which the system nor the nature cannot absorb. Also in quantities which is possible for the nature to digest, like carbon dioxide, which unfortunately is produced many times in excess to the nature's absorption capacity. So the entire approach of economic circularization is summarized by 10 terms, which are refuse, rethink, reduce, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, recycle, and recover. And if you look at the first 5 terms, then you may notice that they discourage new production, rather, they suggest to minimize or even eliminate new purchases or reuse what has already been produced to the extent possible. So the idea to refuse, rethink, reduce, repair, refurbish comes in contradiction to the capitalist goal of perpetual maximization of returns, which necessitates perpetual increase in production with no upper limits. Can we ask a capitalist that how much is enough? And the capitalist would not have an answer to this question, as no amount of growth is enough for the capitalist. But the nature has limits, and any organism in nature which attempts to grow indefinitely will do so at the expense of other living organisms, and will tip off the balance of the ecosystem, which will also ultimately make it impossible for even this ever growing organism to survive. So capitalism keeps producing stuff in increasing quantities, and if more and more stuff is being produced, then more and more people should also buy the stuff in increasing quantities, even if they do not really need the stuff. And we have a wide range of products available which do not specifically cater any needs, rather these so-called wants, which is rather described or defined by the corporations themselves. And in order to make it possible, capitalism attempts to psychologically manipulate the customers into buying stuff and spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year in advertising campaigns to convince the public, for that matter. The message is that if you want to be happy, then you should buy more, and the modern man who do not have any other purpose in life, who has been significantly disconnected from his other family and community, who is rather living to serve his own material interest, but keep feeling this existential void deep inside himself. This modern man or woman does become addicted to shopping because shopping does make him happy for a short period of time, and when his brain stops producing this chemical called dopamine, he begins to feel miserable again. So, a consumer who is deeply addicted to dopamine hits, which he or she receives from buying new stuff, may find it very difficult, if not impossible. It would be like swimming upstream to live a life where he or she can refuse to purchase new stuff, rethink or repurpose the stuff already purchased, or reduce his or her overall consumption, specifically when he or she is bombarded with messages from the corporate world to buy new stuff. Now, somehow the consumers who want to refuse, rethink, reduce, repair, or refurbish the products they already have because they belong to the middle class, for example, or their pockets do not allow, or maybe they want to save money, or maybe they have been convinced to live a sustainable life, they will still find it hard to do so because of the practice of planned obsolescence, which is generally practiced by manufacturers to ensure repeat purchases, despite it is technically possible for them to make long-lasting products. They design products to fail after a few years of usage so that the customer is forced to purchase new products. This is done again with the pure intent to increase profits, but eventually create huge amount of waste, particularly when the products are not designed to be recycled. So, why all of this is done in a capitalist society? To answer this, we need to look at the metaphysical foundation of a secular, individualistic, and materialist culture where capitalism rules. From the point of view of capitalism, a human being is a material being. Uh, from the secular perspective, it is suggested that this material being is an outcome of billions of years of an evolutionary process, and when this Darwinian idea is imported to human societies, it presumes that human beings are competing with each other in an infinite game of survival of the fittest. And in a capitalist society, if you have more capital, then you are more fit to survive. And when everyone in a society falls for this notion, it eventually leads to a never-ending race of perpetually accumulating capital in a very individualistic sense. So, in any society where such a mindset dominates or is reinforced by the system of power, industry, and education, as well, the individuals in such a society will not voluntarily want to come out of this race due to the fear of being excluded from the process with no alternative to fall back. A society which is grounded in a secular, individualistic, materialist, and capitalist beliefs and values and norms cannot be a place where we can find a stable foundation to establish a circular economy. Capitalist and materialist beliefs rather push us from uh, perpetual accumulation of capital and encourage us to participate in an infinite race to even increase our consumption levels. So we perhaps need an alternative metaphysics here, an alternative set of beliefs, values, and norms which would blend with the idea of secularization and provide a stable ideological and cultural foundation to establish a circular economy. And Alhamdulillah, Islam indeed does that. Islam indeed provides this alternative set of beliefs, values, and norms, which interestingly offers a natural fit to the idea of circularization. So, from the perspective of Islamic belief system, we are not a byproduct of an evolutionary process. Rather, we are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a very specific purpose. We are not just material beings, we also have a soul which finds contentment not through material pleasures but in remembrance of Allah and in being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sustenance is also promised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and racing or competing for material wealth is discouraged explicitly in Quran in Surah Al-Qasr, and if we look at Surah Asr, it sets the criteria for success of a believer. And in this context, the human soul finds the contentment in not accumulation of stuff, but in sharing of stuff with others in taking care of people around in family and community, and also by taking care of the natural order and the other life forms which exist around. So taking care of others begin with the close proximity in Islam, whereas the paradigm of economic circularization also encourages to prefer local over global, because transporting stuff to faraway places has a massive carbon footprint, which makes the globally organized supply chain as unsustainable by default. An incident between Sahaba Karam mentioned in Sahih Bukhari clearly encourages Muslim to prefer people in the neighborhood while selling stuff. So local will have a preference over global even while organizing a production supply chain, as this preference is explicitly encouraged in an incident mentioned in Sahih Bukhari. This narration explicitly says that the neighbor has more rights than anyone else because of his nearness. And this specifically directs the believers to prioritize doing business with those who are in close proximity. So the idea of economic circularization, which has bent toward localization, is directly endorsed in here. Islam encourages Muslims to for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 219, to share what they have in access. And in previous slide, we have seen that we need to prefer people in close proximity for that matter. A sharing culture therefore exists by default in an ideal Muslim society. So circularization ideas like rethinking of product and their reuse is a natural fit in a Muslim society. Quran and Surah Al-Isra also instruct Muslims to avoid any kind of wastage, and this principle can be applied to any situation, even while organizing the production supply chain, where from the very beginning of the extraction of raw material to manufacturing to distribution and to consumption, and the wastage which is generated even after the consumption must be minimized to the extent possible as per this directive from the Quran. So this commandment from Quran also goes against the idea of planned obsolescence, which was mentioned earlier in this presentation. So here's a summary of all the ideas which are extracted from the analysis and comparison of a capitalist belief system with and ways of doing stuff with how ideal Muslims are supposed to organize their life and economy. So there are approximately 9 points which I would like to state here, starting from that the natural life and environment must not be damaged in the process of extracting raw material, growing crops, or producing energy, unless it is unavoidable to fulfill some basic needs of local population. Planned obsolescence also must be avoided. The products are to be produced to last as long as technologically possible. All type of wastage will be avoided to the extent humanly possible. In case if any wastage is produced, then it will be reused in the production process. In case if the wastage cannot be reused or recycled by anyone in the market, then it should be ideally avoided. In case if the wastage cannot be reused or recycled, then it will be at least biodegradable or easily absorbed into the natural environment. A market for all types of second-hand or reused products will exist. A sharing or gift culture will also exist as well in parallel to the exchange economy, and local resources including manpower and raw material to be utilized in manufacturing with local needs. Local supplies to be preferred, and if the ability or capacity is not there, then over the period of time, ability or capacity to produce stuff should be developed locally instead of maintaining reliance on suppliers on a part basis. Alright, this is the conclusion of my presentation, and I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you.